So thank you so much. Donnie and I, for the next sort of 40 minutes, are going to be talking about the race to net zero. If we go on to the next slide, and a short intro for us. So that's me, Jo Jolly, as it says there. I'm Deputy Director at the Environment Agency, and I'm leading our newly formed Bespoke and Emerging Projects team. And again, happy to talk about that more, but very much linked to bespoke and emerging ways of working, and so heavily linked to what we're talking about today. And very privileged to be talking today with Donnie McNichol, and as it says there, working across multiple sectors, and I can speak from first-hand experience how energising it is to work with Donnie, the way he thinks differently, and the way he can understand complex problems, and particularly through the focus of the human dimension and what we bring to things as human beings. So a real privilege to be working with Donnie on this. So if we're going to the next slide, please, Donnie. As an overview then, there's three aspects to what we're going to be talking about. Why does the race to net zero matter? And why are we particularly focusing on us as a project delivery community, and specifically data analytics? What is it we've been doing as a data analytics task force? And then finally, how can you get involved? How can you contribute to make a real difference? And so the why. So if we can go on to the next slide, and apologies if I'm lagging behind slightly on the slides because my broadband. This is and it's from Qualitative, so James Bevan, and in a speech back in 2019, he said, when he was talking about the climate emergency, he said when he was at Harvard Business School, the most important thing he learned is to make sure that the main thing, is to make sure that the main thing really is the main thing. Easy for me to say. So often, and I just love the simplicity of it. And what he said in this speech back in 2019 was, I've been chief executive of the Environment Agency for 2.5 years, and it's only just occurred to me what the main thing is. It's the climate emergency, stupid, is what he said in his speech. And he said, I've been saying it to myself every day since. So that, for me, is a real guiding light. So if we go on to the next slide, and talking about what is the problem? What is the problem of the nature and the climate emergency? And last week, the new IPCC report, and in fact, you don't need to look far. You only need to turn on the news to see the devastating impact that climate change is having on our environment, on people, and on wildlife. And just some of the data, Donnie, if you can show the slides, I won't talk about them in detail. But the data and the evidence is there. It's profound. And although we're seeing those climate changes happening now, the predictions to 2050 and the years leading up to it are absolutely devastating. And to be clear, the way it's not only, and I don't use that word lightly, but it's not only the business and the environment in the locations where we will see increased flooding and other environmental impacts. It's also the way it starts to break down the whole system of the way we live. So, for example, in the Mekong Peninsula region, a huge amount of the world's rice production takes place there. But the sea level rise impacts show devastating flooding across that whole area by 2050, and one sea water inundation to rice growing areas will wipe out rice production for the foreseeable future. So the effects, the impacts suddenly and catastrophically, exponentially increase. If we go on to the next slide, please, Donnie. I had a huge privilege to be invited to a closed meeting with Sir David King. And he talked about 3 things that we really need to be focusing on. 2 you'll be very familiar with. The 3rd, perhaps not. I certainly wasn't. It was the first I'd heard of it. So David talked about the need for deep and rapid emissions reduction. I think we're all pretty aware of that. He also talked about the need for massive removal of greenhouse gases at scale. So that's through the planting of trees, through the development of sea kelp to absorb carbon out of the atmosphere. But what he also talked about was the need to restore damaged climate systems. And what he described is that many climatic systems now have actually gone beyond a tipping point. And he talked about the Arctic, and he described that every summer now, more of the sun's energy is absorbed by the sea and less is reflected by the ice due to the shrinking ice caps. So that means the sea heats up more, the ice melts more, and during the winter, the ice that has frozen melts more in the summer. So we get this negative, this sort of feedback loop where more ice melts in the summer than can now refreeze in the winter. And that's why the Centre for Climate Repair at Cambridge has been developed. And that's why engineers at Cambridge University are now developing technologies to refreeze the Arctic. That's what they're working on, to restore damaged climate systems. So this is happening now. This nature and climate emergency is facing us now in our working lifetimes, on our watch. And there is something we can do about it. And Sir David Attenborough said recently that actually what we do in the next few years will have an impact for the next 100 and 1,000 years and beyond. So it's now, it's in our time. So if we have a look at our project delivery profession, then what's our role? What can we do? How are we looking? And I'm afraid when I look at the evidence, this doesn't look great. Oxford Business School have carried out studies of over 10,000 major projects across the globe. And what they've ascertained is that the probability of delivering a major project within cost, time, and the original benefits is 0.5% likelihood. The next point says that 1 in 3 of all hours worked in the UK are actually spent working on projects. And yet, when we look at the project heaviest sectors, which is construction and professional services, what we can see is that productivity has not improved in at least 20 years. So I'm afraid it's pretty strong evidence that as a profession, we're not learning as we need to, certainly. So we're facing a real emergency. And as a profession, we can see that we need to do things differently. We can't keep doing what we've always done. We have to make a step change. What is it we can do differently and quickly and dramatically that will make that change? And this is where the role of data analytics will indeed play its part. And this is where you, as project professionals, and with a keen focus on data analytics, can absolutely play your part. And I think a really interesting insight comes from a study that the Institution of Civil Engineers carried out last year, where they wanted to understand what makes good design, and really focusing on the point that design shouldn't be just the role of so-called designers. We should all have a role in that. And what came back around the question of sort of what's getting in your way in terms of designing projects that reduce greenhouse gas emissions and increase climate adaptation in your projects. And the response was, it's not part of the project brief. Now, I found this fascinating because I thought, well, do you know what? Loads of things aren't part of the project brief, are they? It doesn't say to comply with the law, maybe. It doesn't say to, you know, to remember to eat your dinner or something, but we do those things. It's endemic, it's systemic, it's in us, it's what we do. So I want to ask you, how do we as project professionals make this part of what we do? The climate and nature emergency just being part of the project brief. And what Leslie Hodgson said to me is, this is a systemic problem, Jo. It needs a systemic solution. So I also come with good news. I believe greatly in the phenomenal creativity and inspiration of human beings, and I do genuinely believe we can tackle the nature and climate emergency, but we need to act now, and we need to make a step change in how we work and what we focus on. And the two things we need to focus on is creating the environment for humans to be at their very best, to be at their most creative. And as project delivery professionals, we can do this. We don't need a policy or a law or a project brief. We can choose to do it. So the two things we can focus on that I know will make a massive difference is the environment we create for people. And I want to focus briefly on psychological safety. At the Environment Agency, we've been working with behavioural psychologists to understand how do we truly create a collaborative environment for delivery. And it led us to the work of Amy Edmondson, which some of you may be familiar with, where Amy Edmondson has really studied the very close link between psychological safety in the workplace and high performing teams. And what she noticed in her studies of some hospital teams was that initially in her studies, she noticed that the hospital team that was reporting the most mistakes actually had the lowest mortality rate. And to start with, she thought, this doesn't make sense, this can't be right. But what she came to understand was, it's the hospital team that felt psychologically safe, that had the working environment that felt they could report the mistakes freely and openly, therefore learnt the most, therefore had the highest performance and the lowest mortality rate. And this model here is one that our delivery partners who we've been working with at the Environment Agency, a company called Zircon B Talent, have developed themselves around what psychologically safe teams typically look like down the left-hand side, and some of the behaviours and things you might see in down the right-hand side of what you might see in psychologically unsafe teams. So the environment we create is profound, and how we free up capacity and make sure that as humans we don't repeatedly do the things we're not good at is where data analytics has an enormous role to play. And if we go on to the next slide, this is the focus of the task force and the vision of so many people on it. And something that I love about the task force is the ethos of the people on it, where they are all working for the greater good with low ego and coming together to share their experience and expertise as to how we can move this bold ambition forwards. And as Andy Murray said, the ambition is a bold one, but we do have as a community an opportunity to work together. We can just do this, to democratise how we share data, to democratise the solutions we use, as we've just done over the hackathon over the weekend. And together we can accelerate this pace of change so that we can fundamentally tackle the nature and climate emergencies. So, I will unashamedly read this slide. I know it's not in any good handbook of what a good presentation looks like, but for me, these words really summarise exactly where I am right now. And these are the words of Emma Howard Boyd in a speech she gave to the CBI last year. And she said, this was a construction roundtable meeting where she said, in its scale and complexity, the climate emergency is more difficult to manage than coronavirus. We must adapt and get to net zero quickly. This demands massive change across industry. The Environment Agency and our delivery partners are working with behavioural psychologists to help us overcome the natural human barriers that will get in our way, because this will expose vulnerabilities and it will require our courage, and it will require our collaboration and trust on a scale we haven't seen. And that's where we are. What we're talking about here is sharing data, is collaborating, and is making changes, step changes in project delivery in a way we haven't yet imagined. And yet it's in our gift to do this. And just to be really clear, the world's largest investors are increasingly calling for climate action, and this will start to change the decisions that clients make. We will become more demanding, we will become more innovative, but we can't afford to wait. And my point again is that I don't believe we need to wait. I think that the most successful governments and organisations and project teams will be the ones that get ahead of this trend, and they're the ones that will be prepared to demonstrate and share the case studies which will collectively raise our bar across our industries. And this is the final example that I wanted to share before I hand over to Donnie. So this is the Boston barrier. It's a phenomenal feat of engineering that is recently completed, and it's providing flood protection from East Coast storm surges in Lincolnshire. But what the project team did is started to tackle that conundrum of, this is a systemic problem, we need a systemic solution, what is the framework we can start to use? And what they did is they mapped the benefits, the multiple benefits of this project against the 17 UN Sustainable Development Goals. And again, very happy to share much more of this with anyone who's interested. And what they recognised is that the project delivered benefits far beyond its original stated goals. So whilst this was done in retrospect, if you like, it was done in retrospect, what I'm advocating here is, how do we, as project delivery professionals, use this framework as a way of looking forward, as a way of optimising every single decision we make, so that we create the greatest benefit for society, for the environment, for the economy, and minimise the harm, so that every project we deliver, like I say, delivers so much more beyond its original stated goals for society, for economy, and for the environment. So my final slide then is just to remind ourselves collectively how much power, how much influence we can make to make a difference, and that we have a choice. The ability to share information through data analytics, to make sure that we are driving out waste in every single decision we make, and driving up that productivity across our profession in a way we haven't seen for over 20 years. So it starts with us. We can make this difference, and I'm going to hand to Donnie now to start talking about the what and then the how. So thank you so much.
Great, thank you, Joe. And my performance in moving the slides forward definitely improved as that went on. So I may have another career possibly in moving slides forward. So thank you, Joe. I'm going to cover the what. So we have, as Joe has pointed out, this is all based around projects data analytics. It's all based around the task force. So the focus, we're not sadly trying to change the whole world. Our focus of what we're talking about is all to do with projects and the power of what data can do. It may seem like a strange thing to me if somebody told me a few years ago that I would be focusing on this. I'd have found it quite strange, because my world, it was more around teams, leadership and so on. But it's become blindingly evident that if people don't have the information to make choices and to be informed, then there is little point in many of the other processes and structures that we have. We need to give people the insight that they need. So I'm going to cover off the what the task force has been doing. There are 7 work streams. There were 6 original work streams: engagement, data quality, solutions development, research, data access and skills. And we've recently added this climate and nature emergency. That partly came through the task force wanting to apply its energies and insight from the work in the 6 work streams onto a specific topic. And as Joe has quite clearly articulated, there is nothing more important than the climate and nature emergency that we're facing. So as of today, we now have our own work stream page on the task force website, which is great. So we now have a home, and we'll be sharing more from that. So who are actually the work stream members? Well, I won't go through and name people, but we've got representatives necessarily from Joe, Robert McAlpine's Projecting Success, UCL, Petrofac, and Team Animation in the group, and that's the group there that's been meeting. I think we started this journey in the beginning of January. In March, we did an initial presentation, more of a concept at that point, and now in August, this is the update, and it's the launch of what is, the presentation of what will be launched formally very shortly. But, nothing much will change now between now and the end of October when we formally launch then, but I'll explain more. So I'm mainly describing what we're doing in phase 1. So what were the questions that we were looking to address? You know, we wanted to make sure this was within the project or data professional sphere of influence. It wasn't top down. This was a bottom up focus that we had. What could we give to people? Very much as Martin spoke about earlier, what can we give to people to make their lives easier? What can we give to people to inspire them and to inform them, make them aware? What can we also do to make the biggest impact? So if you are inspired to do something, what could you do? How can you share what is working and deal with the challenges? So we've built that into what we're doing in phase 1, so that we're sharing knowledge between people. And also a kind of top-down element to this as well is people working at the coalface in projects, PMO, data analytics and so on. What's the link between what they do and what the strategies and policies are that are being set either from organisations, by bodies, or by local or central government? And we also want to answer your questions as well. So we have spoken to a number of people, and these were some of the questions we believe that people have been asking is, you know, what should I be considering? What am I doing now? Just to stress the fact that we are not trying to fix or solve everything around carbon. This is the professional worldview, and it's the focus is on the data and analytics. Data and analytics, we think, is an enabler for all aspects of improving the way that methodologies deal with carbon, the way that operations deal with carbon, etc. Data is at the heart of it, but that is the focus of this initiative. I wish we could come up with one thing that would solve every other issue, but that's not the case. So what we would like to do is to raise awareness, inform people, challenge, motivate, allowing people to make positive choices around carbon on the projects. I'll apologise at this point. I'm going to use two words throughout: carbon, which is a very crude simplification of a very complex area, but carbon in the broadest sense of the word, anything to do with the emissions that are having an impact on climate change. So I'm simplifying it down to just the word carbon. And when I use the word projects, I mean transformations, change, programs, portfolios. So I'm using projects in the simplest sense of the word. We do need to keep in mind that we all need to start somewhere. And, you know, whether it's a large or a small personal or professional choice, there are things that we can do. So what exactly is it that we have done? We have created something called a carbon self-evaluation. It's not focused on capturing actual carbon data. This is answering questions around and we're structuring the evaluation for people to complete around the 5 existing work streams, so the 6 work streams. And what we're doing is these are the questions that we want to in summary cover. Is carbon even being discussed within my organization? What access do I have to it? What quality is the data? Do I have knowledge and skills? And what solutions and tools exist to support me? So we are, the evaluation is being structured. It is going to capture metadata, but it's also going to go through and ask specific points against each of these, and then ask people to make an assessment against it. And the assessment is, we've used, rather than a typical Likert scale, we've used a slightly different approach, which is more, well, you can see the example there of, we're going to ask people to assess against from one extreme of totally chaotic or ad hoc, right the way through to whatever the response you give is. It's continuously being optimized and improved, and it's completely embedded in the world that I work within. We're, just to stress, we're not going to be asking people to say what the organization is doing and trying to project what the organization is doing. We're asking people what their lived experience is. So it's within you and your direct team that you are working in. The evaluation is going to be online, and when complete, you will be sent a PDF report with your personal data. So here's an example. These are the various areas, the 6 sections that we're going to cover within the report. There's an example of some of the points that you're going to be asked to make an assessment against. With a little bit of time, once we've primed this initially, we will have data that will allow you to compare yourself and to change. You'll be able to assess yourself by level, by sector, and a few other areas. So you will be able to do a comparison of where you are against others once we've built up sufficient data that would give us that distinction between sectors and the level and so on. We're also going to be asking people what you do and could do and the challenges that you face against each of the different sections to do with the structure, the skills and so on. And that we will feed back to you, but that's going to go into the database that is being created. And I'll talk a little bit in a moment about what we will do with that. The personal reporting that you will receive, as I said, will be created, and what we're looking to do is then provide you with a report. This is a mock-up of what we're imagining. We will provide back to you whatever you've provided, and based on the data that we have at that point, give you the analysis and ability to compare yourself with others. That's your report, but we're also going to be producing a report which will appear on the Nature and Climate workstream page, which is around a general report. Now, just like you know, some mad scientists, we do hope that this will be dynamic and you'll be able to sit there and watch the data coming in from the many thousands of people that are going to complete this, we hope. And you'll be able to then compare yourself and look back at your report and see, as this develops against either level, sector, the area you work in, and so on. So that's the intention. Again, it's a mock-up, and we're going to be providing additional information to individuals on this. I should stress, we will need to, as I've mentioned earlier, prime this initially with data. So our intention is, once, and we're still working out exactly how to do this, once we get to a certain point, we will then go back to all the initial respondees and say, look, you should have a look at this, because we've now got data that will allow you to compare. Let's say you're a project manager or data working in PMO in the retail space. We've now got sufficient data that you can do a comparison. So we're still working out how exactly we will do that. The narrative that you provide about what you can do, what you are doing, you could do, and the challenges you face are going to become really valuable. because that's the qualitative feedback that we're looking for to get true insights and be able to, and what we're looking to do with that is, of course, to capture and share it back to you directly in the report, the immediate report you receive, but also to curate and analyse to allow us to share with responders insights as quickly as possible. If there are trends that are appearing immediately or identify themes, we want to be able to go back to people and say, that isn't this interesting? Again, we're working up the mechanisms for that now. Inform the 6 work streams around the challenges, so we can go back to the original work streams and say, here are particular challenges or particular actions that people are taking, which will help to prioritise the work within the work streams. Start to do things like holding a mirror up to industry leaders on the reality, the kind of lived experience. If people working in a project, in a PMO, are not being impacted by or are struggling with standards or policies and so on, be a good thing for us to be pushing back. And of course, we want to be producing reports and insights and sharing these. And I'm sure we are going to be doing hopefully many future meetups over the years of the things that we find. Now, I did stress, I'm going to use the term again, phase 1. This is all phase 1, and we're looking to launch the actual carbon self-evaluation in October, possibly a little bit earlier, but there's just a few aspects that we need to look at. One of the other things we want to do is, that's all at a very individual level. We do want to analyse the data as it comes in, and I mentioned earlier about the alignment between what the lived experience of project data analysts and so on are, and what the policies and standards are telling us. So that may well be part of the analysis that is being done, and we're delighted to have Grant Mills from UCL involved in helping and shape what that may be, and that's the kind of example that we may be doing. It's an example from the construction industry there. So what would we like to do in advance of COP26 in November this year? If we launch late September, early October, we have got the opportunity to create some, obtain some data, analyse that, gain insights hopefully, and then publish preliminary findings. We're actually looking at opportunities. I would hate to say who possibly has a route into COP26 and set any expectations, but we do hope that, I'm not sure if we're going to be on the front stage with the leaders of the UN, but we would like to think we would be able to do that. We can do this within, as Joe made the point, we can do this within our own sphere of influence around our own community, but it would be good if we had something to share at this level. So if that's kind of phase 1, what is phase 2? Well, phase 2 is one, it's going to help prioritise the task force, the other task force work streams, as we get insights about the lived experience on one particular topic, cutting across all those work streams. Introduce company-specific completion. Now, this was something we put off to phase 2 because it was turning out to be a little trickier. At the moment, anyone can go in and complete the carbon self-evaluation. A number of people have said how good it would be, and I can name, Joe has mentioned for the Environment Agency, and I know Alex Robertson's in the call from Petrofac, and I know Gareth and Grant from Sir Robert McAlpine have said it'd be pretty cool to be able to do this and get our own internal data, so that we could see it within that organisation. Then, of course, it can go out and it's anonymised. How we do that, we need to still work out. That's what we've imagining for phase 2. Could even be from a professional body point of view who would like that analysis done from their own membership, but all the data goes into the broader data set. We want to contribute to challenges to the Project Hack 11. In October 2021, there's 2 examples from Project Hack 10, which were fantastic. The Curly Wurlies and the emissions tracker. I'm not sure if that's the names or not. the groups. But had a look at those last night, and it really is fantastic what's been done. We're looking at ways that we can contribute, and we have a few people on the call tonight who are from different worlds, from the worlds most of us are in, and we're working with them to think how we might be able to do that and put something into Project Hack 11 and work with Andy and the MPA on that. Also, hot off the press, there is a PMI UK have just agreed that they're going to be running a Transforming the Net Zero Landscape Through the Power of Projects conference, and that's happening again in October. Seems there's an awful lot going to be happening in October this year, and it's being supported by PMI. Some more details on that. We've got 2 sessions on that, which will be presenting something similar to this, may even have some initial data by that point. So that's the what, and I'll just finish now on the how you get involved in this. So how to play a part, and needless to say, hopefully you all recognise Greta and what an impact that young woman has had on almost the planet. Quite remarkable. So we'd like you to provide your immediate feedback. We assume there'll be the same mechanism as normal to obtain feedback from today's event. Volunteer at either through email and contact at pdataskforce.com or through our own online form that was just created today, which is fantastic. Also, if you are interested in testing the carbon self-evaluation, we're doing that in the next 2 to 3 weeks. So there's a few organisations, including Environment Agency and Petrofact, who are doing a very limited test of that at the moment. If you would like to do it, your data, it's just to test how it works, the level it asks, the way the questions are written, etc., etc. That is something. If that's something you're interested in, again, you can use that QR code, and then complete and promote the carbon self-evaluation when fully launched in October 21. We're going to be asking everyone to bang the drum about that as loudly as they can. So to finish up, Joe and myself, the other members of the work stream, we believe we have, individually and collectively, we have the answers, and we want to support people to make the difference. Very much, as Martin said, the aspiration of creating, the solutions, making them available to people. And collectively, we believe we can inform the profession, challenge decision makers, and develop data-driven solutions. And that's really what we're looking to do, and what Joe is full of passion for this. I am, as well as all the other members of the work stream. So thank you very much, and I'll stop sharing and we can switch back to questions, if that's okay.
Excellent. Thanks, Danny and Joe, for that great presentation. I think Martin has just now left us, so I'll take over the question we've got in the comment section. So if you guys are happy to take some questions, we've got a few in the comments. We've got one from Rick. So what can we do about China? They emit 30% of the world's CO2 and don't plan to reach peak emissions until latest 2030.
Donnie's, yeah. My broadband's cut out. Yeah, well, I mean,
I'm not trying to plug a book, but I think it is just a smidgen outside the scope of what we're aiming to do. Something like that, which I think is maybe coming in reverse. Bill Gates' book. Apologies if I'm not trying to be humorous or provide a glib answer, but it's crikey. I don't know where to start. Our focus is on that multi-trillion world, which is to do with projects and change. We're trying to influence that to do with carbon. I agree. There's a massive impact for all of us. Historically, what all the countries have done and what countries currently are doing. So I'll pass over to Jo. She's got a really comprehensive answer for this to provide.
Yeah, don't I wish that. My mind goes to a few places. One is, I think, change is coming through investors. So if you you may well be aware, but if you look up, you know, the sort of $1 trillion hedge fund investment companies like BlackRock, you'll see that they won't invest in companies unless they have the climate emergency on their top 3 board agenda items. So I think there are ways that that changes happen. You know, it's either through incentivization, isn't it, or through law, really. And I know that, you know, none of these are simple answers. The bottom line is nobody's ever solved a nature and climate emergency. So what we're facing here is a completely unknown problem. I'd say what we learned from coronavirus is when we've got something really hard hitting and immediately in front of us, we can be pretty extraordinarily creative, and my goodness, we can adapt. So we've proven that we can make these changes. I know that, you know, none of this is answering the question directly. I don't think there is a direct answer. I don't know it unless somebody else does know it. But none of that, I don't think, should detract us from what we can do every day. Because collectively, if we're all making even what might seem like fairly small changes in the context of China, collectively, they make a difference. And my encouragement is, why wouldn't we? You know, I think that's our duty and that's what we should be doing. So, but my view is, yes, there's some massive problems, but I'm going to keep doing everything I absolutely can because that will make a difference.
Excellent. Thanks, Joe and Donnie. Another question here. How will we intend to use PDA to measure the impact of the UK government's net zero policies on the UK population?
Well, again, I'll give it a first go, Joe. We need to narrow it down. If this work stream was hugely successful, we would play a part in helping people identify the impact of carbon on the projects element of that. So only in the change element, I realise it's another subdivision again of the overall thing. So reducing the net zero for the UK, how on earth do you disentangle the part that projects and change play in that? Because it's so inherently part of it. You need to make change to make the reductions, but you need to make change simply to survive and continue. So it's quite a complex scenario. But if we can help people to build up the skills, the knowledge, the availability, the decision making and so on around the use of data to help people with carbon, that's the part that I think the task force in this work stream can play.
And so I'm looking at I was just looking at the question again. So it's how can project data analytics, how to use project data analytics to measure the impact of the UK government's net zero policies on UK population. So is that how effectively the policies are working and whether they're having the impact they need to in the time, perhaps? I mean, again, it's hard to, it's not a conversation, is it? But I'd like to understand that question better. But I mean, again, I think data analytics has a fundamental role to play, and you know, perhaps in part to that question, some of the work that happened in the hackathon over the weekend around the reporting of the scope 3 emissions, you know, I think it has a fundamental part to play in how well are we doing, are the policies making the difference, and then showing the evidence, because they're very often a really influential way to change things is to provide the evidence, because it's hard to argue with that, isn't it? So if through our data and our data analytics show that the policies are not working, then that's how we help to change policy. And again, you know, it's something, and it does work. You know, we've done that at the Environment Agency in helping to change investment funding decisions, you know, how we invest in flood defence. We've, through providing evidence back to Treasury and back to others, we've now included a mental health aspect of the impacts of flooding. That's a big step forward. And again, I know individually none of these things on their own might change the world, but we keep working towards it, and we will make a difference.
And maybe a slightly left field one as well is the rise in prevalence and value seen from reference class forecasting. It's, of course, based on evidence. Now, at the moment, the evidence around this is scant because it is so complex to try and disentangle anything. And it's difficult enough for an organisation to report its carbon, then to disentangle the projects that it runs. But it runs projects with 15 other organisations. How on earth do you disentangle that? But at least for things like reference class forecasting, which has been led through, Oxford University, they've got an opportunity. There's an opportunity to X years from now to actually have good data to go back to and say, when you said that your project would reduce carbon in the organisation by X, or the project itself would emit Y, we've got actual hard data here that we can compare against and tell you whether that is right or wrong. I think, not speaking for Joe, but I think we've got to be realistic. We are years away from getting anything that is meaningful and could objectively be challenged, within a factor or percentage. I think is fantasy. A factor within a few factors is likely as close as we can get nowadays, if we're honest.
Excellent.
Controversial. Sorry if that's people on the call hopping up and down. If that is the case, please join the work stream and help us in what we're doing.
Cool. And one more question, guys, we've got here, which is quite long-winded actually, and it's relating to psychological safety. So I think there's one for you, Joe. Is this work building on the Black Box Thinking book by Matthew Syed?
Yeah, I saw this question in the chat. I don't know the book, so I'd love to have a chat with whoever's posted this question. So there's two parts to this, I think, isn't there, around what can we learn from things like airline safety, the sort of, and the checklist approach, which I know transformed airline safety, and then also adding an environment case to the 5-case business model, and having projects that are considering net zero or better. Oof, there's so much in all of that, isn't there? Again, so I don't know the book, but I will definitely have a look at that. I don't profess to be an expert in psychological safety. It's a journey that we're on, and I'd really happily talk with anyone who'd like to know more. So we engaged behavioural psychologists because we recognise at the Environment Agency we've 2 years ago started on a new collaborative delivery framework. So collaboration is at the heart of the commercial model in delivering our flood defence programme, and we recognise that we're finding some of this quite difficult, and so we're working with Zircon B Talent, and we've carried out a survey of over 600 people, both Environment Agency staff and delivery partners, very openly, to understand inherently what's in our culture, inherently what's getting in our way, and what do we need to be working on in partnership with our delivery partners, so that we can be the best high-performing team we can be. And it's from that we came to the work of Amy Edmondson and psychological safety. And what Amy Edmondson also says is that there's no organisation that really has psychological safety. I think she cites some, I think Google, maybe others, are probably leading the field. But, this is this is why I'm talking about the sort of untapped potential of things that we can make step changes in, rather than the marginal gains, rather than doing what we've always done, and then seeing things like productivity not improving, risk management not improving, lessons learned not improving. Well, what do we need to change? And so we're on the journey. We're learning. I'm sharing this with the MOD at the moment. The MOD are doing some work around psychological safety. They have a bit of a toolbox, I think. So again, if anybody's interested, our absolute purpose is to share. We want to share this for as broad a benefit as we can, but I'm very much learning as we go. And in terms of the 5-case business model, and oh my goodness, there's lots of questions. That's great, isn't it? An environment case, perhaps, but I think what I'd what I'm really promoting is that the environment, and when I say the environment, I mean sustainability, I mean the UN Sustainable Development Goals, I mean health, education, poverty, you know, our environment and true sustainability runs through everything we do. That it is systemic, that it's not this add-on thing, that we'll do the economic case, we'll do the you know, all the elements of the 5 case business model, and then we'll do the environment. It's, you know, how do we set up our commercial case so that it optimizes the very best decision making for sustainability? And if we can get to that systemic thinking, then every single decision will be optimized for the best and to minimize the harm. And that's what I'm really talking about, if that makes sense.
I'll just chip in as well, Joe, that, you know, again, I'm not trying to book envy a book thing, but there's the Checklist Manifesto. It is a cracking book. So I should put a link up. And there's, I haven't actually got the black box thinking, but the Matthew Syed, I think the stuff he does is fantastic. And it's a good question, Ed, that you've shared that. Just in the 5 case model, we joked, Joe, about the just a couple of days ago about, you know, if you're a project manager, could you slip into the business case a sustainability section, and then everyone works beavers away to complete the sustainability section? Somebody may well spot it and go, where on earth did that come from? Now, it's a slightly humorous response, but it's what's to stop you saying that it is something that we should be considering and putting in? And take it up, Ed, to your point, is, you know, it would be useful to have this added into the 5 case model, but I take Joe's point, it's a bit like having safety separate. Then it's like, well, there's a safety box and there's safety people that look after it. It's the same with this. It should be inherent within each of the, you know, the cases that are put forward. So happy to speak after this, Ed, as well. It'd be good to catch up. Sure.
Thanks, Johnny. Another question here. What are your thoughts on the role that some of the larger tech providers play in developing solutions to help manage various phases of a project? Tools such as one-click, LCA, driving new capabilities across the industry designed to reduce carbon.
I've got some thought, maybe not across the industry designed to reduce carbon. Yeah, I mean, just an example of something, certainly in terms of, you know, operational delivery, one thing I think that gets really slows us down and grinds down productivity is sometimes it's not the sort of 1, 2 or 3 big things, big ticket items, silver bullets, is it? I don't think. I think it's the multiple things that happen every single day that slow us down, but it's how do you get visibility of those, and how do we improve them? And I think it's hard to get visibility, and one of the things we're looking at doing at the Environment Agency is learning from the great practice on the A14, where there was an app used for the on-site team where if there were any delays, like a lorry was late or someone was sick or whatever happened, the site team could report it through this app, and so improvements could be made. Obviously, it helped productivity. It would have improved well-being. You know, it's great for teams to be able to raise issues quickly and have them resolved quickly. So, I mean, again, you know, I'm not close to some of the technology that is available. That's part of the journey I'm on, and I'd really welcome, you know, if anybody's got any ideas, things they know about, things we can be readily adopting, let's share that. But in short, I think data analytics, apps, tech companies have a huge role to play. But I think one thing that Martin has really advocated and opened my eyes to, a lot of the stuff that's being sold and developed, we can just do ourselves. And actually, how do we, as a task force and others, actually drive companies to be focusing on the higher end stuff? Because actually through hackathons and just doing the stuff we do here, we can actually generate a lot of the lower value, easily developed work, and actually really influence the tech companies and others to be focusing on the higher end, you know, smarter, fancier work that they would need to be focusing on. Donny, what are your thoughts?
I guess two thoughts. One, yeah, these companies' names mean something to me, but not a lot, because there just seems to be you know, it's funny how when you start focusing something, you start to see stuff. So everything around carbon now, because I've connected to people on LinkedIn or I've started to follow stuff, all of a sudden you're starting to see this. I am not well informed. I'm not well placed to make any comments specifically, Bernard, on your question. But when we talked about this work stream overlapping with other work stream, there is a data solutions work stream. So one of the overlaps would be between this work stream and the data solutions is to maybe at a point of phase 3 possibly is to say, well, we've investigated and here's the top 10 apps or things that you could use, or as Joe said, point towards as Martin has identified, you know, there may be a solution space where it's actually free of charge. There is something here that you can go and it's a ready reckoner. You know, if your construction project is X size, here's likely the broad impact from a carbon point of view. If it's got, you know, and that's the kind of thing that might be freely available or done, again, not well placed because it is such a kind of burgeoning area at the moment. And I would hate to put my foot in it by talking about any of the things that I've seen in the last few months in any detail. I am aware of what those things, the carbon calculator companies that have been formed and technology behind it. It's fantastic. In fact, I've got a call with one in a few weeks, just simply to have a chat about what it is they do, because it's fantastic, just purely from a matter of interest. So, sorry, that's not much of an answer, Bernard.
And following on from that, guys, another question here. For Joe, as part of the research work stream, as well as I'm struck by the carbon calculator, is a game changer for decarbonisation. Is there the possibility of a carbon chatbot to help the project manager?
Wow, yeah, so I'm struck by the carbon. Sorry, I'm just rereading it. I'm a slow reader, beg your pardon. That's from Tim, isn't it? Hi, Tim. Oh no, is it? Yeah. The research work stream.
It is, yeah.
By the carbon calculator is a game changer for decarbonisation. Is a possibility of a carbon chatbot to help the project manager. Gosh, I'd love to get Tim's thoughts on that. I don't know if Tim can come in. I basically, one of the things I've said to my team lately is, so, you know, is there a possible? I think there's a possibility of almost anything, if that doesn't sound cheesy. So what I'm challenging my team with at the moment is, you know, let's find the thing that almost we have to say no to. So what, you know, yeah, what? Sorry, it doesn't feel like an answer. You know, what would that entail? How do we make that happen? But you know, I think the answer is yes. If it's something we can fundamentally do that will add value, that machines are innately good at, that humans never will be, then let's do it. Because then, like I said earlier, that frees up the human capacity. It stops us recreating errors. You know, I don't know about anybody else, but you know, lessons learned is one of the banes of my life. So if there's a way that we can share data, share lessons, share the great idea, share the learning, why wouldn't we? Now, I'm not saying it's easy or it'll happen tomorrow, but I don't see as a community why we can't just make progress with this.
Excellent. Thanks, Joe. Another question from Tim as well. Have you come across the value toolkit based on the 4 capital models, natural, human, social, produced, which is a great tool for establishing a value definition?
No, I haven't. Again, at the Environment Agency, we've built what we call our emissions strategy for the next 10 years to 2030. Our chief exec and board took the decision to design that around the UN Sustainable Development Goals. So that's the framework that we're using that our sustainability strategy is built on. But no, I don't know it, Tim. I'd love to talk that through with you. Do you know that one, Donny, at all?
I don't. I know that the IPA has put materials out recently around value. I know that's not the same as that. So yeah, similarly, be interested in a chat about that, Tim. And hi, Tim. Nice to see you again after a while.
Yes, thank you, Donny. Thank you, Joe. Happy to share that offline. And I think the chat bot, in answer to your question, Joe, could either be as a conscience or someone to answer questions. There we go.
And both, you know, and I think when you get those two, the human part, you know, some of the instinctive part, coupled with the you know, the machine learning, the evidence, the data, I think then, you know, in combination, that's something really powerful.
Excellent.
Thank you.
If there are other questions now, it's a chance to come off mute to ask Joe or Donny any other questions. So I'll just go mute myself and see who pops up. Otherwise, Donny or Joe, is there anything else that you guys would like to cover in response to some of these questions?
The only thing I'm concerned about is just how many people are going to volunteer to help test the carbon self-evaluation. So please, only 50, 60 of you, no more we're looking for. So I think the thing that's come from listening to this is there's an awful is how Joe, it's a kind of question. We know the narrowness of what we are doing in this work stream in phase one. How do we keep showing the value of that and make sure that it does for our own motivation for to help the industry and so on, but conscious of the breadth and depth of the scale of what is needed. So I think maybe a kind of in the next meeting when we have next week is that whole thing around what phase two is and what do we do. We're not even fully finished phase one, but with phase two, maybe we need to be thinking about phase three. You know, I'm thinking bigger, the chat bot. You know, I'm going to go into that tonight as soon as I come off this.
What have you done, Tim?
Oh, excellent. Well, I've really posted the link in there for those who want to be involved with the evaluation form as well. So the link to the Microsoft form is there. Otherwise, excellent presentation, Donny, Joe. Really appreciate it. I think it really shows how organisations like the PDA Task Force or initiatives, even like the PDA Task Force and Environment Agency, kind of leading the way on this. And hopefully from this presentation, guys, you've got a clear idea about how and why us as a project community need to use it to help grow self-awareness and make change. So more importantly, what you guys can do and what your organisation can do to take that step forward and join the mission to net zero. And I've seen Molly's just posted another post in the chat to register your interest for the CFC, so that is excellent. And on that, if there aren't any more questions, we'll close the talk here. So a big thanks to Joe and Donny. Thanks, guys, and congratulations to all the winners from Project Hack 10. Hopefully we see you at Project 11, where we can tackle more environmental sustainability challenges and develop some more solutions we can hopefully put into the Solution Centre. Otherwise, have a great evening, guys, and we'll catch you in a bit.